Welcome to Lead Today with me, Kalyna. Let's talk leadership. Hello and welcome to the next episode in this series. Today we'll be talking about perspective. If you're new to the show or this series, we're diving into my book, which is coming out December of this year, 2022. It's called Memorable Lessons to Leave a Legacy. My work has been focused on career development and leadership development coaching. So mainly what I talk to people about is their career, but inevitably I've also gone down the rabbit hole with people about their relationships, their mind, body. And I've had a couple of contracts where I look specifically at coaching people through their marriage challenges, through PTSD, and a variety of ages. I was just kind of scanning in my mind. Like, I've literally coached people from university age, even straight out of high school, 18, 19, all the way up to newly retired, figuring out their purpose. So no matter where you're at in your career or the season of life you're in, I think that there's something here for you when it comes to figuring out the way you want to contribute to the world, figuring out what your purpose is, how you want to impact others, what that means to you, how to live a meaningful life for yourself, and then through that meaning, impact others. So a little bit different from, build the most effective resume or get the highest paying job. We're really looking at building your character, because that's what I am working on every day, is becoming the person that I want to be, that I admire, that I need to be to go through the challenges that I'm personally facing in my life. We all face a different series of challenges. And so my hope is in this series of podcast episodes, and if you purchase the book, that you really are able to refine your character and skill set and move toward being a person that you're really proud of. So thank you for joining me on this series and this journey. If you're enjoying it so far, I would love it if you donated to the show using the links in the show notes. Every coffee donated or small monthly donation really does make a difference in me being able to continue doing this work and showing up for you week after week, month after month. So thank you to everybody that has already contributed. And another big shout out to those who supported the pre-sale campaign of this book, which was actually started in 2018. So I just want to reemphasize how important your contribution was at such an early stage of this project for me to be able to develop awareness of the project, interest in the project, sign with a publisher that I'm aligned with and is aligned with me. All of those things were made possible, and me being able to bring this book to life because there were people that decided to support me from the very beginning. So I just want to send another thank you out to you for supporting me in writing a book, which, man, I would say I never thought that was something that I would do or that I could do. I didn't think I was a writer, let's say. And so I think that's a perfect segue into this chapter, which is about perspective. And really, as a coach, that's what I'm working on with people day in, day out. You have one perspective. I'm not a writer. I am not this. I can't do that. I don't think. All of the doubt. And we shift into possibility, opportunity. What are you? Who are you? What do you want to be? Where do you want to go? So we really shift into a possibility focus. And I think that that's the main sort of thing that we're reinforcing. And I think that's the question you can ask yourself as a listener of this episode. What story do I want to reinforce? Because the reality is you are the person who is in your mind and speaking to yourself the most out of anybody, right? You're in your thoughts, you're in your mind all day long.
This episode would not be possible without Anchor. It's free and the easiest way to make a podcast. They're creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
And whoever else you let into your mind is also a really important a really important part of your life. And we tackle that in the chapter on empathy in part 3 of the book. But for now, what story are you reinforcing in the way that you're speaking with yourself, the way that you're thinking, and what you're choosing to do? So that's what you should definitely focus in on when we're talking about perspective. And I really think that this chapter in particular is for anybody who is feeling stuck again, who's wanting to get out of a certain negative cycle of thought or unproductive cycle of thought. And it can be about your work, but it could be about anything else. It could be about relationships, how you're dating. It could be about your body or the way that you're taking care of yourself. It could be about your relationship with God. It could be about your emotions, and it can be about work, your career, of course. Anywhere in your life, any part of your life where you're feeling as though your perspective, the perspective that you've taken, the stance that you continue to reinforce to yourself is not serving the person you want to be. I recently had a session with a client and she was telling me, I'm in my 40s. This is just not what I thought I would be doing at this age. This isn't where I thought I would be. I'm disappointed. And I think with that perspective, there are a lot of, disappointment is valuable because even it feels uncomfortable, and that uncomfortable feeling within us is an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity to make a change. So the idea that changing your perspective is going to be the end point is not exactly it. I would say that from awareness, which was the last episode, when you're aware of your thoughts, of your feelings, of what messages are sort of coming to you through the Holy Spirit or through your intuition, when you're aware of those things, then you can decide, okay, are my actions serving me? Are my thoughts serving me? Or are they taking me astray? Are they leading me astray? So which one is it? And that's where you can shift the perspective. So first, awareness. What am I thinking? What's that dialogue? Next is this chapter. Okay, so what story do I want to reinforce? So that's what we really get into in this chapter in the book, and what I would offer up to you in this episode to really ask yourself, right? What story am I reinforcing in my life, in the different areas of my life? And in the ask yourself section of the book, which for anyone who's new to this series, there is a client example or personal example, sort of giving you a lay of the land of what I believe this skill is and how I've seen it at work in my life. Then there's the mentors table, where mentors that I've either met or benefited from their work are laid out in relation to that particular quality or skill that we're talking about. And then there's an ask yourself question, where you're really diving into, what do I know to be true of this word and this skill? What do I believe to be true? Why is it important to me? Maybe it's not important to you. What would you call it instead? We really dive into that word and how you want to embody it in your life. So I give you examples, I can give you some ideas, I give you what I've learned from others, and then it's really, I pass the torch to you, and it's, what do you want to do about this? How do you want to approach this? What can you do to further this in your life? And then there's some action steps to bring it forward into your life based on what, again, I've seen works well for myself and for the clients that I've worked with. It's actually remarkable to tally up hours and see that I've coached over 5,000 hours. Every time I say that out loud, it's like, 5,000 hours? Where have the years gone? And even that question, where have the years gone, right? This perspective of when we look back on our lives. I think that's really what I'm asking you to do in this book, perpetually and mindfully. Where has your time gone? Where do you want your time to go? How do you want to spend it? What's important? And that's really where we're really diving into those questions. And if you just took those questions, even from this episode, and sat down and wrote those out and took them seriously, I think you would be in a different position in life. And I think the value in working with a coach one-on-one, somebody like me or me personally, is in having someone to ensure you dedicate the time, you make the space for this type of inquiry in your life, and you remain accountable to it week over week or month over month. And that there's sort of this partner to be that reflection to you of what it is you're saying. So there's value in the reflection of you saying something and having someone give it back to you and then reflecting on it. There's value in creating the time and space and being accountable to an external process But if you're willing to go and really reflect on these things and get quiet and still, and then answer some of these questions for yourself from the book as well, and delve further into these qualities and into the questions throughout, I'm very convinced that your perspective on life will shift because you will be the one shifting it through your answers. So that's what I have to say about perspective. Another big piece of this chapter is limiting beliefs, I would say. So when you are making that distinction, when you're aware and then you're making the distinction of, do I want to reinforce this or not? If it feels like it's limiting you, which would be a limiting belief, things like, I'm not good enough, or I don't have enough time, I don't have enough money, I don't have enough experience, anything that really makes you feel lesser than or incapable, that's limiting you. That would be a limiting belief. And we dive into how to identify those further and what to do with them and how to change them. And I think that that's really important because you recognize them and then they're there, and to change them can be challenging. And I would say that the first step, as I've said, is the awareness of them and then replacing them with something better. So if you go through the book, you'll do an exercise where you're really able to go through and identify all of them and then change them to beliefs you want to have. And then there's a third key step of that puzzle, which I'll leave as a bit of a teaser for you to check out the book. But definitely start by understanding what your limiting beliefs are, and then reframing them. So changing your perspective on them. And a way to do that is if you Google also as if shifts. It's a big tool in coaching. We use it a lot. It's something you can use on yourself. I think they're really fantastic. And they're just different options for shifting your perspective and giving you different vantage points, because that's what you're trying to do. When you feel stuck in a scenario where you are, you need to kind of move the pieces around the board and see a different perspective, see a different way of going about it. So that's what we do in that chapter. I really hope that if there are things that are kind of nagging at you and feeling like you keep thinking in a way, but you're stuck, I really hope that you'll write those out and attend to them, because they just become bigger and, in my opinion, harder to manage when you avoid the things that are the thoughts that are not serving you, the beliefs that are not serving you. They give you a sense of gratification. They give us gratification in some sense, right? Because it's okay. If I tell myself that I can't because I'm too old, well, then I don't have to try. And that's great. And we talk about that in the book. And it's definitely, there's a benefit to that. It lets us off the hook. But this book and this podcast and this episode is not about letting you off the hook. It's about asking you to truly question who it is that you're being in the world and to develop character that you're proud of. That's what this podcast is about. That's what I'm perpetually searching for, is how can I be somebody that I'm proud of today when I look back on it 10 years down the road? Like, I want to be proud of what I'm leaving behind in this world. I want to be proud of this podcast series, and not proud from an egotistical standpoint, proud from I delivered a meaningful, valuable thing to people. I helped change people's hearts. So when I think about my perspective, if I'm coming from a place of obligation, frustration, feeling lesser or not good enough, one of my big switches is, okay, no, why am I doing this work? I'm doing this to change hearts, to change minds, to bring people into the understanding that there is a different way to think and operate in the world and set boundaries and convey your message and show up. There's so many different ways. And so rather than falling into the easy way or the way your parents did it or the way society does it, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with societal norms, but you get to choose which norms you adhere to, and you get to choose which communities you're a part of. So one thing, and I spoke about this in an earlier episode of this series, but it's always good to have a reminder, is I was listening to an episode from Jocko's podcast, and he was talking about how we put ourselves in different ecosystems. So one way you can shift your perspective is to take yourself out of your current ecosystem that is sort of dictating what's important, and that values hierarchy and the power structure. Take yourself out of it, unplug for just a little while, and look at other people that are not a part of it, and you'll see that their perspective is hugely different. So that's a powerful perspective shift that changed my life, actually. because what he's really saying is, yeah, you can be in that world and you can value what they value and you can try to climb up that ladder and be important in that world because it matters to you. But it's not the end all be all. It's kind of like high school, right? It's such a small pond. So take yourself out of those ponds once in a while to gain a new, fresh perspective. Because when you're so in the weeds of a certain community or a certain group, like let's say podcasters, right? When you're so in the weeds of it, it's really hard to kind of see beyond. So that's another perspective shift that I think is really powerful. And if you're looking for more perspective shifts and want to really dive into what this means for you in your life, I would love for you to grab a copy of the book. It will be out in December, early December. And I think that you'll gather a lot from both this chapter as well as subsequent ones. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I hope you've had a couple of shifts and a few questions that you're walking away with today that you can answer for yourself. And I will see you in the next chapter, which is chapter 5, and we'll be talking about vulnerability, which I guess you can't see if you're listening, but I made a bit of a scared face because I think that's what vulnerability and being vulnerable does to many people. So if you're interested in vulnerability, how I approach vulnerability, what vulnerability even means, and why it's actually such a strength to have as a part of your character and cultivate as a part of your character, then I'd love for you to check in on the next episode on vulnerability in my book. So see you there and take good care in the meantime.